The current situation for migrant workers in Qatar is generally very poor. There's a range of problems that they face. For example, most are tied to a particular employer. They have their passports taken as the moment that they get there. Before they've even arrived in the country, they have to pay exorbitant fees to recruiters in their home countries to get there, which means they're in debt. Typically, they will not actually be paid the amount that they were promised. They can't change employers very easily. Too many have very poor work conditions. What does that mean in practice? It could be working on a construction site in the hot sun, having a lack of access to health services, having poor accommodation, working very long hours, having very few breaks. When they face other forms of abuse, or if they try to change employers, they can't do that, or they face threats. Even if they want to access justice, in some cases where there is an opportunity for redress, they incredibly have to pay money to the legal system. So a whole range of problems that workers face, and of course they're not allowed to unionize, to collective bargain. It's a really difficult situation for migrant labour in Qatar. There's a range of estimates that anywhere between dozens to hundreds of workers dying every month. There's some claims that a worker is killed practically every day. Some people did investigations recently that came up with that. Now, we're not in a position to endorse any of those findings, but it's very clear that too many workers are dying because of poor working conditions, because of poor legal protections. Will it get better in the next 7 years or get worse? Well, we obviously hope it gets better, but there's only way that that can be guaranteed, and that is by changing the laws, reforming the laws so that workers are free to change their employer. They only work set, hours. They get overtime for any extra hours that they work, have good accommodation. They're allowed to keep their passports, and they're allowed to bring up complaints about labour abuse to the authorities and to get as much support as they need. If those things are not done, then our grave concern is those numbers of deaths will stay the same, and they could possibly get worse. We are not opposed to Qatar hosting the World Cup. We don't take issue as to when it should be played either. Our concern is about migrant labour abuse, and in fact that's relevant for any place in the world. Now, I happen to cover Qatar, but in fact we investigate migrant labour abuse across the world. We also feel very strongly that Qatar has the capacity to actually improve the situation. In some respects, there have been improvements. We saw recently an announcement about an electronic payment system that should help to regularise payments for workers, to an extent reduce forced and exploitation of labour. That's a very welcome thing, but it's really only a start. So what we'd say to the Qataris is that not just that we're here to complain about poor worker conditions, but that we feel you can make the changes, but it's really up to them now, because we all would rather celebrate the World Cup in Qatar in 2022 for the Games, rather than think of it as a time when shocking labour abuse took place.
Just finally, the next two World Cups will be in Russia and Qatar. Would you like to see countries bidding to hold the tournament have to meet a human rights criteria in the future?
Absolutely. Certainly when it comes to labour standards, that questions can be raised very legitimately about other human rights issues. But we've been saying to FIFA for a very long time that human rights mandatory requirements have to be part of any assessment of who takes a bid. If you don't put that into the requirements, our concern is that those will be swept under the rug. And of course, a whole range of abuse could be taking place under the shadows of one of these major international sporting events.
And have FIFA listened to that? What's been their response to that?
We've certainly had responses from FIFA, but we are disappointed so far by their lack of further engagement. We even had Sepp Blatter recently saying that it was not FIFA's responsibility to deal with human rights. Now, there certainly are voices in FIFA that are listening to us and have voiced deep concerns about human rights issues. That's great, but we'd like to see much more from FIFA than we've seen so far.